Hi everyone, I'm Citizen Spokeswoman Ruth Wasserman Lande. Today is September 1st, 2024. This is the daily briefing of the Israeli Citizen Spokesperson's Office. We are live on Instagram, X, YouTube, and LinkedIn, and available afterwards wherever you can get your podcasts. Please start submitting questions in the chat, and as always, like and subscribe to help us reach a wider audience. Today is the 331st day of October 7th war. By now, everyone has seen the horrific news. 6 more hostages were executed by Hamas in captivity. The remains of 6 hostages were recovered yesterday from a Hamas terror tunnel near Rafah. Hamas is executing hostages. Hamas has executed dozens of hostages in captivity after brutally murdering over 1,200 people on October 7th. We must never forget the kind of barbaric enemy Israel is fighting. The Hamas rapist regime executed parents in front of their children and children in front of their parents. Hamas kidnapped and murdered babies and grandparents. One of the executed hostages was Hirsch Goldberg Poland, an American citizen whose arm was blown off trying to protect festival goers at the Nova Music massacre from Hamas grenades. There are indications that Hamas executed the 6 shortly before Israel's forces were able to reach them, and in light of last week's hostage rescue. US President Biden said that he is devastated and outraged by Hamas' latest murders, and he pledged that Hamas leaders will pay for these crimes. These are his words. Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu talked of the cruel enemy who wants to murder us all on 7 different fronts. He added that whoever executed our hostages is not interested in a hostage deal. Hamas is demanding Israel capitulate to allow it to take more hostages while executing the hostages it has already been abusing for 11 whole months. Israel wants a deal to bring hostages home from Hamas terror dungeons today. Israel wants a deal that won't allow Hamas to kidnap yet more hostages tomorrow. Israel wants a deal that won't allow Hamas to execute more innocent civilians ever. The war that Hamas declared on the people of Israel cannot end with hostages in Gaza and Hamas on its feet. The people of Israel need the 3 Ds: destroy Hamas, demilitarize Gaza, and de-radicalize Gazan society. It's not only the Gaza Strip. Israel is fighting a war on 7 fronts. This morning, 3 Israeli police officers were murdered by terrorists on a highway into central Israel from Hebron, a city that is governed by the Palestinian Authority. Early yesterday morning, a pair of terrorists tried to simultaneously detonate 2 separate car bombs at 2 separate locations against Israeli civilians between Hebron and Jerusalem. One explosive prematurely detonated. Both terrorists were stopped by security guards. Several people were injured. Thankfully, no innocents were killed on that occasion. Israel is investigating the possibility that these coordinated attacks were planned by foreign agents. In fact, Iran has been behind flooding the West Bank with explosives and weapons and is largely responsible for radicalizing the West Bank in general and strengthening the Hamas and the Islamic Jihad in it in particular. Last week, a Hamas suicide bombing was narrowly averted in Tel Aviv. Countless lives could have been destroyed. These murderous attacks are exactly why Israel's security forces have been carrying out major counter-terrorist raids to prevent the next murderous attack. I'm just reminding our audience that the West Bank has been governed for the last 30 years by the Fatah-dominated Palestinian Authority headed by Abu Mazen, aka Mahmoud Abbas. Hamas and Fatah, the two main Palestinian factions, hate one another but agree on one thing: from the river to the sea, meaning no Israel. Israel needs to ensure security for its people against the entire Iranian ring of fire that is threatening Israel from 7 fronts. One last item that is not getting enough attention. As I speak, Israel is facilitating a polio vaccination campaign for children in Gaza. Together with the World Health Organization and UNICEF, Israel brought in 1.3 million doses of a special polio vaccine meant for 600,000 children in Gaza. Most of these children were already vaccinated. In fact, as per the World Health Organization, Gaza had an optimal vaccination rate before the Hamas attacks. These doses are special vaccines meant to protect from a new strain of polio that has recently appeared from Egypt. In addition to bringing in the vaccinations, Israel has been coordinating tactical ceasefires daily between 6 a.m. and 2 p.m., as well as daily humanitarian situational assessments together with the international organizations. In fact, Israel is providing aid because it wants people to live in Israel and in Gaza. Hamas, on the other hand, wants people to die in Israel and in Gaza. Hamas needs to end the war that it started on October 7th, lay down its weapons, and release all the hostages. Now let's take some questions from our audience watching live on social media.
We have a lot of questions today from people watching across our social media platforms. I'm going to combine a couple from Robin on Instagram Live, from Ed on YouTube. People are asking about Israel's needs on the Gaza-Egypt border, on the Philadelphia corridor on the one hand, and also asking what kind of deal is available. What do we know about what Israel is negotiating to free the remaining hostages?
So thank you for that very important question. The Philadelphia line, in fact, is the border between the Gaza that we are all speaking about. In fact, it was ruled by the Hamas until recently, until the IDF went in, and Egyptian territory. In fact, Rafah is divided by the Philadelphia line. There is the Gazan Rafah and the Egyptian Rafah. Now, in Rafah, many tunnels had been found. In fact, tens of tunnels, very long ones, that are wide enough to allow weapons to be smuggled in. And this is the very lifeline for the Hamas. And this was the case. Now, this is something that the Egyptian regime has obviously given the green light for. Otherwise, it could not have happened, because nothing happens. In fact, such a huge undertaking in Egyptian territory without the green light from the government. And this has been providing the Hamas, the terrorist organization Hamas, with the very weapons. With them, they perpetrated the crimes that we are talking about on October 7th. So the Philadelphia line and the protection thereof is extremely important to prevent another attack, another October 7th, and the strengthening all over again of whatever is left of the Hamas and even other elements that are radicalized or extreme Islamists in the Gaza Strip. This is something that we cannot allow to happen. Now, some people say, why don't we allow technology to take care of it and we go out of that line? Well, we had technology on our border before October 7th. We relied a lot on technology. Technology is very, very important. Can it be relied on 100%? Unfortunately, we are the victims of the fact that it cannot be the only thing. There needs to be a presence, and that presence is disputed between the sides. Now, do I think that the Hamas truly will stand behind its words? Frankly, I give no such willingness, no such honor, no such respect to the word of Hamas. I do believe that they are working on trying to break Israeli society from within and to try to increase the pressure, the international pressure on Israel from other factors, including Egypt, the United Nations, the United States, Europe, and so on. So this is the issue of the Philadelphia line. And to answer the question of whether there is a deal, well, many factors are trying to negotiate some kind of a deal. The Egyptians, the Qataris, the Americans have a vested interest, the Israelis, of course, and the so-called Hamas. Do I trust the Hamas to stand behind what they're saying? As I said before, I have very, very little trust in the Hamas. Can a deal be struck? Well, in fact, I have little faith in a deal because I have little faith in the Hamas. However, Israel is not leaving it only to military force. It is trying its hardest to negotiate a deal simply because we have people, our own people, held hostage by the Hamas, and we have to do everything possible to release them and to try and get them back. So are there negotiations going on? Yes. Do I believe in the sincerity of the Hamas on the other side? Unfortunately, I have little faith in them.
This is a question that came through on our Instagram stories. Can you say a little bit more about what's happening in Judea and Samaria? What caused the security situation to deteriorate? Are there certain places in Judea and Samaria where the situation is better or worse than others, and why is that?
Absolutely. This is a very, very, very important point. Judea and Samaria, what is referred to as the West Bank by the international arena, is an extremely important point. Why? First of all, we need to understand that there are hundreds of meters only between what we call the West Bank and Israel proper. In fact, I myself live in the northern part of the Sharon. There are literally hundreds of meters that separate the Palestinians in the West Bank and Israel proper, and civilians, in other words, kibbutzim, moshavim, and little villages exactly like what happened in the south of Israel on October 7. That is, first of all, we need to understand the geographic proximity. Second of all, one needs to understand that the West Bank has been governed in the last 3 decades by the Palestinian Authority, the same Palestinian Authority that is headed by Abu Mazen, Mahmoud Abbas, the one that is so-called the president of the Palestinian people, recognized by the international arena. They've been ruling the West Bank as an autonomy, as I've said, for 3 whole decades. Now, the Fatah, the party, the Palestinian party, headed by Abu Mazen, in fact, is the arch enemy of Hamas, the Islamists, headed by Sinwar and his cronies. They cannot stand one another. In fact, I even believe that they hate one another more than they hate us. But they all compete, literally compete on who kills, murders more Israelis. And this is something to be understood. Iran encouraging for years already the smuggling of weapons via Jordan, a small teeny country that the US and the West prides themselves on it being neutral, on it being stable, and so on, has been used, or rather misused, by Iran to smuggle weapons to whom? Into the West Bank, but not to Abu Mazen, to the Hamas. Because the Iranians, or rather the Islamic regime of Iran, has been weaponizing the Hamas and the Islamic Jihad, the extreme Islamists, making them grow and become stronger in the West Bank, because that will allow them not only to oppose Israel, to kill Israelis, to take over and make Israel's life miserable, but also to take over the leadership of the same Abu Mazen, Mahmoud Abbas, whom the entire international arena stands behind for the Palestinian people. And not only does Abu Mazen not fight the Hamas, but in fact he competes, or rather his people, his military arm competes who will kill more Israelis. So in the last few years, we've seen a militarization with the way that we've gone out. The IDF has actually gone more out of the West Bank, in other words, allowing more freedom for the Palestinians. And again, we see a militarization, smuggling of weapons at the same time, while Israel allows workers, Palestinian workers from the West Bank, to work with permits in Israel and be able to earn money and bring food back to their families. This is a huge area to take note of, because it's not less dangerous than Gaza. In fact, I would even argue at this point in time, the West Bank is more dangerous than the Gaza Strip at this moment.
Today is the first day of the new school year in Israel. Can you say a few words about the general atmosphere in the country today, and especially about how people who are evacuated from northern Israel are dealing with starting the new school year in a faraway place?
It's simply a humanitarian issue. The fact that tens of thousands of people are still evacuated with no end in sight from their homes in the entire north of Israel. Many, many children began random schools in different places where they've been temporarily relocated by the government of Israel. I have 3 children in the Israeli educational system. On the one hand, I was happy and excited to send my kids to school after a very long summer vacation. On the other hand, we are all concerned, worried about the security situation. As I said, the fact that the West Bank is yet another front, the North is a front, the South, the Gaza Strip is still a front, and there are always threats of security attacks and terrorist suicide attacks throughout the country, as we've mentioned before. But you know what? The fact that we had the news this morning, very early in the morning, in fact, from last night, that 6 hostages were murdered while in captivity, makes the entire country, and I cannot stress it enough, mourn. And this is undoubtedly something that the children of Israel will also discuss in their schools. This is an absolutely surreal reality in which children live in a reality which is unbelievable, knowing that our own people are being still kept captive in dungeons in this day and age by terrorists. They're being murdered. And this is after these terrorists themselves have started this war and murdered, massacred, burnt, killed, and carnaged our people. This is not a normal thing for the international arena to sort of go on with its life. This is the reality of beginning school again on the one hand, but understanding there's so much complexity on the other hand and simultaneously. Thank you so much for all of your questions, and we'll be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. Israel time as usual. Thank you.